All right, everyone, get ready for a deep dive. Today, it's all about the Canada Border Services Agency, specifically their reporting requirements. And we've got some sources to guide us.
Oh, interesting stuff.
Definitely. First up, we've got info on who exactly needs to report to the CBSA. Then there's this whole government webpage about something called the ReportIn app.
An app. Okay, I'm curious.
Right. And finally, a report that goes deep into how the app was developed.
Sounds like we're going to get pretty techie today.
For sure. But before we get lost in the digital weeds, let's start with the basics. Who are these reporting requirements even for? Like, it's not everyone who steps foot in Canada, right?
Right, not everyone. Our text source is pretty clear about that. It's more about specific situations where the CBSA wants to keep tabs on someone.
Okay, so like red flags. Give us an example.
Absolutely. Imagine you've got a foreign national who's, under investigation for some kind of immigration violation.
Makes sense.
Or maybe a permanent resident who's waiting on a big hearing, one that'll decide their status in Canada. Those are the folks who might have to report.
So not always about bad things per se, but more like situations where the CBSA needs extra information before making a decision.
Exactly. And the reasons can vary. Could be worries about national security.
Oh, wow.
Past criminal activity. Or even if someone wasn't completely honest on their immigration paperwork, it's really nuanced.
Wow. I hadn't really considered all the different reasons someone might end up on the CBSA's radar.
Mm-hmm.
But, okay, let's say you do need to report. What does that even look like? Daily visits to their office?
Not always. That's where this ReportIn app comes into play. It basically allows people to fulfill their reporting conditions remotely. Yeah. No more trekking to a CBSA office all the time.
Hold on, they have an app for this.
They do.
Color me intrigued. How does it even work?
Well, based on this government webpage, ReportIn uses your smartphone's technology to verify who you are and where you are.
Okay.
We're talking facial recognition and GPS data.
Wait, so my phone's acting like my parole officer. That feels a little big brothery, don't you think?
It's definitely high tech. But think of it this way. It could actually save a lot of hassle for people. The ones who would otherwise be making constant trips to a CBSA office.
True. Convenience is definitely a factor. But back to the tech for a sec. You mentioned facial recognition. How does that actually work? Like, do you just snap a selfie and send it off?
It's a bit more involved than that. So when you enroll in the app, which, by the way, is by invitation only from a CBSA officer, not just anyone can sign up, but you provide a bunch of information, like basic details, photos of your face, even employment stuff if it's relevant.
So they build a whole profile of you through the app.
Mm-hmm.
But do they just trust the phone to do all the work?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that seem a bit risky? What if, my phone thinks I'm my twin brother?
Well, that's where the human element comes back in. Every single photo submitted, according to this webpage at least, gets reviewed by a real CBSA officer.
Oh.
So the technology might help streamline things, but there's still a person double-checking.
Phew. Okay, that makes me feel a little better. Still, using facial recognition for something as serious as immigration, it makes you wonder about bias,
It does.
Is that addressed at all in our sources?
Actually, yeah. Remember that PDF report? It outlines a peer review by Employment and Social Development Canada, ESDC for short, and they took a close look at how ReportIn uses facial recognition.
Ah, so the government keeping tabs on the government. Love that.
Yeah.
What did they find? Was everything all good?
Well, not exactly. The report explains that, for now, humans still make all the final biometric decisions.
Good.
But ESDC did make some recommendations for improvement.
Now we're talking. What did they suggest?
Well, they really want the CBSA to put together a diverse test data set to, properly check for potential bias in their facial recognition tech, basically making sure that it works equally well for everyone, no matter the age, gender, ethnicity, things like that.
That sounds pretty important. But how does it actually work? Do they, have to find thousands of volunteers to take selfies?
It's not about selfies exactly. It's more that this diverse test data set is like a collection of images, and it represents a really wide range of people. And by testing the facial recognition technology on this data set, they can see if there are any, mistakes, or maybe a pattern of misidentifying certain groups.
Huh. So it's like a reality check for the algorithm.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
But what was the CBSA's response? Did they take it seriously?
They did, actually. The report says they are committed to evaluating ReportIn for bias and to address any concerns that users might have.
Okay, well, that's good news. Sounds like they're at least aware of the potential issues.
Yeah.
They're trying to fix them.
But wow, that's a lot to untack already, and we've only just scratched the surface. I think we need a quick break to regroup. Agreed. We've covered who needs to report and the basics of ReportIn, but there's so much more to uncover. And we're back, delving deeper into the world of CBSA reporting and this ReportIn app. Before we took a little breather, we were talking about the CBSA's promise to look into potential bias in their facial recognition tech.
Yeah, that was definitely reassuring. But I'm still curious, how do they actually go about evaluating something like that? Like, it's not there's a bias meter they can use, right?
Well, the PDF report mentions that they compare what the automated facial recognition system says with the decisions made by actual CBSA officers.
Oh, well, okay.
So they're basically looking for any discrepancies or patterns that might point to bias in the technology itself.
So using humans is the gold standard. Got it.
Exactly. And specifically looking for any unfair differences based on, ethnicity, age, gender, that sort of thing. If the tech is disproportionately flagging certain groups, that's a big problem.
Definitely. Got to make sure the system is fair for everyone. But let's zoom out for a second. Beyond the technical stuff about facial recognition,
Yeah.
what are the bigger implications here? Like, for the people who actually have to use this app, what's that experience like?
That's a great question. And it really gets to some important ethical and societal points. On the one hand, you've got the convenience factor. This ReportIn app offers a level of flexibility we just didn't have before.
Sure.
Imagine being able to report from home, from work, wherever. That saves so much time and hassle.
Yeah, I can see the appeal for sure. But at the same time, there's this whole surveillance aspect, right?
Right.
Having to constantly check in with my phone like that.
Right.
It would feel kind of intrusive, wouldn't it?
You're not wrong. Not everyone's going to be comfortable with that level of monitoring, even if it's for a, legitimate purpose. Plus, there's the issue of access. Not everyone has a smartphone or even reliable internet, so that could create a barrier.
Yeah, technology is definitely not one size fits all. Always
Sure.
a trade-off, it seems. Speaking of, the report mentioned something about user complaints, didn't it? What kind of things were people raising?
Unfortunately, the report doesn't give specific examples, but it does say that the CBSA is committed to monitoring and addressing complaints as part of their evaluation process. So they seem open to feedback, at least.
Okay, that's good. It's good that they're not just like throwing this tech out there and hoping for the best, actually trying to make it work for people.
Exactly. And it shows that user feedback is important. If people are having problems with the app, they need to say something.
Right.
That feedback can really help shape how the program develops, make sure it's meeting people's actual needs. But let's shift gears for a minute and think about the future. Where do you see this app going, or other apps like it? What do you imagine 5-10 years down the line?
Ooh, now that's a fun question. It does feel like we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this kind of technology.
I agree. Imagine a future version of ReportIn that has, built-in language translation, personalized support, maybe even educational resources.
Interesting.
To help people understand their reporting conditions, navigate the immigration system, things like that.
Wow, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Turning it from just a reporting tool into an actual support system.
Exactly. And it's not just about fancy features either. I think we could see a real shift towards more human-centered design, where the app is developed with the people who are actually going to be using it.
Oh, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Too often it feels like tech is developed in a bubble, without enough input from the people it's supposed to help.
100%. By involving users in the process, we can create technology that is, not only effective, but also ethical and equitable.
Yeah.
Maybe one day we'll even see ReportIn evolve into a platform that helps build positive relationships between immigrants and the CBSA, something that fosters trust and understanding on both sides.
That's a great vision. It's exciting to think about the positive potential here.
It is. But let's bring it back to the present for a moment. We've covered a lot of ground today, from, the nuts and bolts of the ReportIn app to its broader implications for fairness and accessibility in immigration.
We have. It's been quite a journey.
It has. And it's important to remember that this is just the start of the conversation.
Right.
As technology keeps advancing, we need to stay informed, keep asking those critical questions, and, make sure these tools are being used responsibly and ethically.
Well said. But before we wrap up completely, we have one final thought-provoking question for our listeners. Ready for it? Okay, so final thoughts. We've talked about who needs to report, how this app works, and even what the future of this kind of tech might look like.
A lot to think about.
It is. So let's try to sum it up. What are the big takeaways here? What do we really need to remember?
Well, I think the main thing is that technology is becoming a huge part of how governments manage immigration. And ReportIn is just one example, but it's an important one.
Yeah. And it seems like it could make things a lot easier for the CBSA and for people who have to report.
Definitely. But like we said, it's not just about efficiency. We have to consider fairness, privacy, and access, too. All those things come along with new tech.
Exactly. We can't just blindly adopt something new without thinking about how it affects real people.
Right. We have to make sure these tools are used responsibly and ethically. And that takes, all of us being part of the conversation.
Which brings us to our final question, the one we'll leave our listeners with. We know tech is playing a bigger and bigger role in immigration. So what does that mean for fairness? For everyone having equal access? What can we do to make sure everyone has the same opportunities, even if they don't have, the newest phone, or if they're from a different background?
That's a tough question, and it's a really important one. There's no easy answer, but it's something we all need to be thinking about and discussing.
Absolutely. We encourage all our listeners to keep learning about this, to stay informed about how tech is changing the world around us, and to speak up if you see something that isn't right.
Because in the end, technology should be helping us, not the other way around.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, that wraps up our deep dive. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and keep asking those tough questions.